Welcome everyone, Costini here with a discussion of Arkhan the Black of the Tomb Kings. Now, the Tomb Kings in Warhammer 3 are a powerful race, but they have some issues. They haven't really been scaled up, if you will, for the sake of a campaign in Warhammer 3. They've got some problems. But out of the Legendary Lords of the Tomb Kings, I have to say that I do believe that Arkhan the Black is probably the best Legendary Lord. Animation weirdness over here with the chariot notwithstanding. I can't really explain what's going on there. But regardless, Tomb Kings, let's talk about them for a second. So Tomb Kings are a really, really powerful race. They're a powerful race that doesn't need territory for the sake of their economy, but rather they need territory for the sake of their armies, which are going to be very powerful and crucially disposable. Because all of the Tomb King armies are recruitable for free. And you can recruit them at decent ranks as well in a campaign. Like, for instance, look at the Yolosapien. They can be recruited at silver ranked for free. So you've got completely disposable armies. The only thing that you don't have disposable in a Tomb King campaign are the heroes. And that's only as long as you don't get immortality, for instance, on them. Because once you do get immortality, they are also disposable. Heck, if you're about to lose a battle with the Tomb King army, just get the heroes out of the army, assuming they have any kind of ranks, any kind of value in your campaign, and just lose a battle. Like, your lords are not going to die either. They're immortal. So there are some significant benefits to that. Being able to recruit armies for free and maintain them for free is a very powerful advantage, but it's balanced out by the territory. However, Tomb Kings in general do have severe limitations on how many armies they can maintain in their campaigns. And this also certainly applies to Arkhan as well. The way you overcome these limitations is you get the various dynasties. It takes a long time to research, so compared to other campaigns, most Tomb King Legendary Lords, be it Khalida, Cetra, Katep, will fall behind compared to the number of armies that they will have, which is actually quite important in a campaign in Warhammer 3 because it's flexibility on the campaign map. That's why I mean they haven't been scaled up for a campaign in Warhammer 3. However, Tomb Kings can vassalize factions through diplomacy, so you can end up with a biblical level of power, like, for instance, vassalizing a Volkmar and Forek is pretty damn powerful, pretty powerful in a campaign regardless of how one cuts it. That will certainly give you a significant amount of campaign power to make up for your lack of armies. Like, who do you think is going to get past Forek, for instance, as a vassal? And you do so with diplomacy. Like, you take territory, for instance, in this campaign, I wiped out Scarbrand, took his territory, sold it to Forek, he became my vassal. That's how simple it can be. One of the bigger problems, of course, is with the Books of Nagash, because you actually need to take the territories yourself. So, for instance, over here, I'd probably need to send an army myself after Krokar in order to get this Book of Nagash. Now, thankfully, you don't need the Books of Nagash to achieve your campaign victory conditions, but you may want the Books of Nagash for the sake of, the campaign benefits. But it's kind of annoying. Like, castors can get their artifacts, Forek can get his artifacts. For diplomacy, you can. Like, I could make a military alliance over here with Forgrim, and I would not get the Book of Nagash that he controls. Okay. So, severe limitations. Also, limitations because canopic jars, because in order to increase army capacity, you have a couple of ways. You can obviously get research. You can also spend a bunch of canopic jars to get the Heralds Empowered. There's a Book of Nagash, in this case, in Caracate Peaks, that would increase army capacity by 1 and also give me a bunch of Tomb Guard capacity, 5 for Tomb Guard and 5 for Tomb Guard with Halberd. So that would be pretty powerful. Books are also randomized in a campaign, so it probably is best if you're playing a campaign as Arkhan or Cetra to get the book that increases army capacity from the Rogue Army over here. Or at least as Arkhan to get it from the Rogue Army, as Cetra you can get it from Lamia. Okay, enough about that. So, those are the limitations, those are the strengths. Diplomacy is a strength, free units is a strength, army limitations are a weakness, books are a weakness. Now here's what Arkhan does that breaks the rules completely. So first off, he gets an extra army capacity from the very beginning of his campaign. So instead of starting with one army and potentially having to deal with two, maybe even 3 stacks in some cases with just one army, as powerful as it might be, it's still going to be an issue. But as opposed to just dealing with that for like 15 turns or 14 turns or so of a campaign, you start with an extra army from the very beginning of your campaign. There's a significant level of strength because of that, because it gives you the flexibility to just destroy opponents that every other Tomb King Legendary Lord would struggle to deal with. And on top of that, you also start in one of the safest campaign positions in the entire game. You start in the Land of Assassins. Now, it's not necessarily the best starting province because you have those ports limiting how many buildings you can get early on. But just the fact that you start with both the Wizard Caliph's Palace and the Sorcerer's Islands, and you take Lashiek on turn 1, and you get an entire province on turn 1, that's fairly secure, that very few people will invade, because they can only really invade from the north. The dwarves over here are not particularly hostile towards you. You've only got Rapans to the north. But you can beat Rapans the Lyonesse fairly quickly in this campaign. You just rush her. Or you can vassalize her if you want to. So that's the brilliance of the Tomb Kings. Like, you can use vassals. Because you have multiple armies, you can take more territory, you can trade that territory to get vassalization agreements, trade agreements, all that kind of stuff. That is really the brilliance in Arkhan's campaign. So safe starting position, extra army. Furthermore, Arkhan gets unique vampire count units, or rather he gets vampire count units that are buffed up. So he's going to get direwolves, but not regular direwolves, stronger direwolves. He has special skills over here that give them charge bonus, melee attack, leadership. So these are not your usual direwolves or fellbats or krupgulls that you're getting. And you also get that leadership for his own army. Beyond that, you also get the Lich King skill, which gives you 2 Lich Priests in a campaign. Now, Lich Priests, they're not necessarily the best magic casters, but the important thing about Lich Priests is that they give you replenishment. Tomb Kings may take quite a bit of damage in an actual battle because a lot of their units, at least early on, don't necessarily have the highest level of armor. But suddenly, you can at least recover from those losses fairly quickly. Increasing hero capacity for a skill line, and also starting with the Tomb Prince, as you do in this particular campaign, is certainly a significant level of strength. You can also get an event fairly early on for Necrotech. So I got 1 Lich Priest in this army for Arkhan. I started with the Tomb Prince. I got the Necrotech through an event. Then I have my second army over here that I used early on. I've obviously updated the units, got them things like Ushapti and Caskets of Souls for both of these armies. By the way, Caskets of Souls, they're fairly powerful, or one of the best artillery units in the entire game. They do a lot of damage from very long distance. They will wreck entire armies if you let them. The amount of damage the Caskets do is ridiculous. The only legendary lord that has a more powerful individual army early on is Katep, because he gets more Lich Priests, he has an artillery mount as a casket, so you can get 2 caskets in a battle early on, but he doesn't have that extra army, nor does he have those unique units. So the unique units, if you're playing a regular Tomb King campaign, the only things you'll be able to recruit en masse early on are going to be Skeletal Spearmen and Skeletal Warriors. Well, Arkhan not only has an extra army, but he has all of these units. Now, these units, the way they're recruited is for a unique building. You may not necessarily consider it worth it to get too many of these units in a campaign overall, but just that early game advantage of Krupgulls, Direwolves, and to a lesser extent Fellbats, but super powerful Fellbats, give you a significant advantage compared to your opponents. Because suddenly you have mobility on the battlefield, you have charging units, you have units to harass the artillery or range units with Fellbats, all of that kind of stuff, and your usual line holders in Skeletal Warriors and Skeletal Spearmen. That is the significant advantage that Arkhan the Black has in his campaign. All of these things added together, the Book of Nagash that he starts with that gives him access to these units, because that's how it's counted. You basically start with the Book of Nagash that's unique to him. These extra units, the army capacity, the heroes, it all adds up to giving a faction that's part of a race that's designed to be limited, and suddenly you bypass a lot of those limitations. So you have far more flexibility on a campaign map. And the impact of this cannot be understated, because in general, in a Tomb King campaign, you want to get that extra army as quickly as possible. But you can do it for research. However, every time you research a dynasty, which increases your army capacity, your research rate is slowed down by 30%. So if you get your first dynasty as quickly as possible, you're going to slow down your second dynasty. Arkhan not having to deal with that completely changes that campaign dynamic. So you can basically spend a good amount of turns just researching one dynasty, stopping one turn before it's complete, moving on to another dynasty. I'd recommend the first dynasty, the third dynasty, fourth dynasty is also pretty good. Getting these dynasties in a campaign and just like researching at least the first two, like the first one until it's almost complete, then researching a second one, and you can certainly get 2 armies from the beginning, then we'll get 2 armies in quick succession after another, like at around turn 30. But on top of that, there's more. Yes, there is actually more to this. Because you have 2 armies on the campaign map, that means you can fight 2 battles. Now, why is this so important? And fighting 2 battles every single turn from the very beginning of a campaign. Well, what it really boils down to is this: canopic jars. Now, canopic jars are important for certain research that increases your hero capacity, but more importantly, in a campaign, you can use canopic jars for a new dynasty. The first one costs 800, so I already got that. By turn 43, I have 5 armies of the Tomb Kings over here unlocked. And it's because of the combination of things. I could have gotten 6 had I just started a campaign over and over and over again and gotten enough Book of Nagash that increases army capacity. Beyond that, when we're looking at the situation with his campaign, he also gets a bit of research rate as a benefit in his campaign through his item. And he also gets casualty replenishment and missile strength for the Casket of Souls. So this guy is absolutely freaking ridiculous in every single way that counts in a campaign. It's not just one benefit, it's all of these benefits. Losing a campaign as Arkhan is pretty difficult. In fact, of all the Tomb King legendary lords, Arkhan is generally the one that is going to be the last man standing. Well, Kateb can survive for a decent level of time, but very rarely have I seen Arkhan lose a campaign. Which I've seen several lose a campaign when under controlled AI, and it's because of these benefits: the heroes, the armies, the units. Like, I've seen this guy fight Skarbrand, Volkmar, etc. to a standstill in legendary campaigns. I'm not even exaggerating that. Just for his starting province, wiping out Rapans, which he certainly will very easily. Sometimes Rapans wipes him out when we're talking about AI on AI fight. But he can wipe out Rapans. His AI will generally also take the Atalan Mountain, so he'll get a bunch of unit capacity, he'll have the armies to use that, and it just ends up going great from there. Now, in a long campaign, etc., in a very long campaign, like 100 turns or so, where you no longer have to worry too much about canopic jars. Like, if you're going for a world domination, then yes, Cetra is the better campaign, because he has better benefits for that purpose. However, in a short campaign, if you're looking to establish an early game advantage and take as much of this territory as possible and end up dominating the map, then Arkhan really is your best bet over here. And interestingly enough, he should probably be hated by a lot of factions, but Tomb Kings don't really have that much of aversion with anyone. Now, I feel like Arkhan, in particular, considering who he's working for, should have like an aversion downside with every faction. But the fact that he doesn't, and he only deals with that minus 20 aversion with most, like with Bretonia and all that, and you have an aversion with Tomb Kings, you don't care about that, because you can't confederate Tomb Kings, and they don't necessarily make the best allies. And also, the Tomb King factions start in territory that you actually need to control in order to win your campaign. We can talk about Forik, how he also has, a certain territory that you also need to control. It's not good enough to have an ally or vassal in a campaign. You actually need to control it for a long campaign victory condition. So Tomb Kings need an update, but if you're looking to play a Tomb King campaign right now, I would heartily recommend Arkhan the Black. I think he is the best by far. He creates the best early game experience, which in turn can create a better late game experience, even though he doesn't necessarily have the same kind of benefits as Cetra. I mean, it's down to that calculation. What's better, having a very strong early game or having a slower, much slower and miserable early game as Cetra does, but having more potential after 60 turns? Like, over here, this is turn 43. This campaign is over. Actually, it was over quite a while ago. I was just trying to race for Grim for Carrick Peaks, and I lost. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. If you do enjoy my content, consider supporting me via PayPal or Patreon. Special thanks to Protossx, Kebie, Fingo, JK, Vacre, Alain, Alex, and Daniel, and to all of you who make it possible. Stay tuned for more.